Whenever you're ready.
Hello. Have any of you ever thought about how different life would be, how different the world would be, if the U.S. had never used atomic bombs on Japan at the end of World War II? I'm Corine, and today I will tell you about why it is unnecessary for the U.S. to have used nuclear bombs on Japan. In this presentation, I will be discussing why Japan would have surrendered without the bombs, the impact on civilian life, and why the situation was not nearly severe enough to use weapons of mass destruction. For those who may not know, the Hiroshima bombing was on August 6, 1945, and the Nagasaki bombing was on August 9, 1945. My first point I'll be making is about why Japan was most likely about to surrender. See, America had this strategy called island hopping, which started around here in New Guinea and went up to the Philippine Sea up into the Okinawa Islands, which is right under the mainland of Japan. And with this strategy, America was obviously making Japan resort to retreating back into the mainland, and which obviously gave America the upper hand. And at this point in time, the U.S. had also taken over the air and the sea. And with that, we were basically cornering Japan back into their mainland. And then, not to mention, America also had allies. According to Andrew Jordan's Modern History of Japan, Russia actually had declared war on Japan on August 8th in order to help America. And when Russia had joined, they started over here where Manchuria, or at the time Manchukuo, because that's where Japan had been occupying. The Russian soldiers went in and went all the way down to the Korean 38th parallel, where they met America at. And here, the great majority of Japanese soldiers was actually in China at this time, trying to further themselves into the mainland. And the soldiers America was fighting against was a very little amount compared to what was in China. And so as soon as Russia got into China, which they started the invasion on August 9th, the next day after they declared war on Japan, that immediately cut off Japan from their main amount of soldiers to be able to go back to the mainland to defend against American soldiers if they invaded the mainland of Japan. And according to an interview with a British troop by Norman Redness, British soldiers were actually about to board airplanes to come and aid America. But that was canceled when America dropped the first bomb in Hiroshima. Therefore, it wasn't just America fighting against Japan. They had Russia, they would have had Britain, and I'm sure most of the other allies during the World War II in Europe would have went to aid America once they were prepared. And not to mention, Japan is a country that is very small. It lacks many natural resources, and so most of the resources they need for military has to be imported. And with them being literally cut off from everything else, their resources were running out. They would have eventually been able to not import anything at all for their military. And also, American conventional bombing, like using the napalm bombs, was incredibly effective in Japan. Not only did napalm bombs completely destroy Tokyo, and actually the number of lives, the number of deaths in Tokyo was actually a lot more than from the bombing in Hiroshima, because of the fires that started from the napalm bombs. And actually, leaders such as the Secretary of War, Henry Stimson at the time, actually not only feared that conventional bombing would completely destroy Japan, but he was also afraid of the effects of the atomic bombings. This quote is from his diary about him having a conversation with Truman, which I found in Bartram Berenstein's Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombing reconsidered. And then he said, I told him I was anxious, him referring to Truman, I was anxious about the future of the war for two reasons. First, because I did not want to have the United States get the reputation about doing Hitler and atrocities. And second, I was a little fearful that before we could get ready, the Air Force might have Japan so thoroughly bombed out that the new weapon would not have a fair background to show its strength. Which clearly shows that he knew that the atomic bombs would have a great impact on civilian life, and the destruction would be huge. But he also knew that conventional bombing was already doing a great amount of work. And really, he believed that we didn't have to use such a giant weapon. And using conventional bombing, we didn't even have to enter the mainland of Japan. He thoroughly believed that conventional bombing would have been just fine. Which leads into the impact on civilian life. Not only were people damaged, bones broken, burns, external injuries, family members getting lost and separated, dying, children, being by themselves. But because of the radiation and the heat and the fallout, according to atomicarchives.com, this also affected those who survived with leukemia and cancer and increase in anemia, with blood disorders and a lot of loss of white blood cells, cataracts, malignant tumors, and keloids. And for those who don't know, keloids are when the scar tissue of burns start to become irritating and they start growing abnormally, which this was actually seen in about 60% of people exposed to direct heat within 1.2 miles of the dropping of the bombs. And see, some of these effects wouldn't even appear for 2, 3, 10 years later. There's no true number for this, because the effects of the bombings came so many years later that there's not a true number of how many deaths truly came from the bombings. But it's estimated about 115,000 to 250,000 people had died directly from the bombings, with 100,000 estimated injured. And that was also from Bernstein's article. And not to mention the fallout that went into the environment, and those who stayed in that environment obviously had the fallout effects, as mentioned earlier. And those who are exposed to the radiation, the normal amount of radiation that won't necessarily damage a human is 10 rem of radiation. But those exposed to about the least that was there, which was 100, experienced nausea, vomiting, and headaches, and even higher doses, which was definitely there at the time, 300 rem, went to loss of hair, and the lining of their digestive systems began to be damaged. And lastly, my last point was, the situation was not nearly severe enough to have to resort to such a weapon of mass destruction. As I said earlier, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, and even people like General Eisenhower and Admiral Will Lee had not wanted to use the atomic bomb. They wanted to rethink it. Because according to a New York Times article, the bomb was originally for the purpose of Europe, while we were still in war with Germany and Italy and such, but it wasn't finished in time. And no one ever really thought, hey, maybe we shouldn't have to use it at all. And they were like, let's just use it on Japan, except for those few higher ups who were exposed, but they were clearly ignored. And then back to mostly my main point is that when Japan was going to surrender, there were so many American allies that was willing to help. and the conventional bombings were doing great. And there was no real threat, like giant threats from Japan. Like they weren't holding a nuclear weapon at us, threatening to send it to the U.S. I mean, it is true that at the time Japan was trying to work on nuclear weapons, like most countries, but their advancement in it was nothing compared to the U.S. And so the U.S. truly had nothing to fear when it came to the Japanese nuclear warfare at the time. And so really just overall, the situation just really didn't call for something to go to that extent. So what does it all mean? And there's no doubt in my mind that the Japanese would have surrendered, and that the impact on civilian life was greater than anticipated, and that the situation was absolutely not severe enough to have to resort to that. And I believe, once again, it was no doubt that it was very unnecessary to have to use the atomic bombs on Japan. And just imagine how different history would be if the U.S. didn't. How different your grandparents, your parents, your lives would be. And maybe the Cold War wouldn't have been as intense, or the rush for other countries to catch up to the U.S. would have been delayed. And possibly there wouldn't even be as many nuclear weapons as there are today. And I think it's important to overall reflect on our past actions in order to better our future, and I think it's important for everyone to think about. These are my resources.